Hello everybody, and welcome back to Writing the Rapids, the show where I, Joe Bielecki, talk to writers about writing. Very often those writers have been recommended to me by writers who have previously been on the show, or it's a Rejoinder episode, which this is. We are once again talking to Logan Berry. You may remember him from such books as Casket Flare, Run Off Sugar Crystal Lake, Doom is the House Without a Door. And today we are talking about 2024's Ultratheatre Volume 1, The Sarcoma Cycle from 1111 Press. Logan Berry, of course, is a playwright as well as an author, and we'll be talking about his plays today. You may notice that this is a Rejoinder episode that is kind of late, and because I make my own rules, that's totally okay. Which means that if you or someone you love was on this show and missed a more timely chance to do a Rejoinder, the door is still open. Come on over. These books don't expire as long as they're in print, and heck, even if they're not in print. If you put out a book between when you were on most recently and now, and we didn't get you on, well, hit me up. We'll get you on. I'm doing so many of these that it's getting hard to keep track of everybody, so if you want to support this show beyond reminding people that they can come back on the show, or coming back on it yourself, you can go over to patreon.com/noisemakerjoe, and for just $2 a month, you can get these episodes a little bit earlier than everybody else and make me feel like I'm doing something worthwhile. You can drop me a one-time donation over at paypal.me/noisemakerjoe, and you can buy my book. It's called Tired. It's on Amazon, or similarly, drop me a line and I'll scrounge up a PDF for you, and you can get it that way. If money is not in play, go ahead and retweet, repost, like, share, comment, tell two people about it, listen all the way to the end, leave a little germ emoji in the comments section. All of that will help as well. Now, without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Logan. In the spirit of me being brave about asking questions that I feel foolish asking, I've been doing this a little bit more lately, and I think I'm becoming a better person for it. Logan, what is Ultratheatre?
That's a great question. So it's an ongoing, it's a term that I'm using to sort of bracket off my theater practice. It is a sort of style of theater that avails itself of all historical modes in order to sort of refract the insanely baroque and confusing historical epoch we live in, because it feels extremely theatrical already, like living through live streams, living through paranoid attunements with reality, where a lot of people allege things are staged. It seemed like theater is a very ripe medium for aestheticizing and pursuing this weird situation that we're in, and so that's why I landed on Ultratheatre. Also, credit where credit's due, the amazing poet, essayist, multi-talented person, Monica Bellevon, she helped me come up with the term. She just called it that one day, and I was like, that feels correct. I don't know if you mentioned this in your intro, but it's the book we're talking about today is a little older, so I feel a little out of practice talking about Ultratheatre, although it does remain on my mind. So apologies if that was a confusing way of describing it.
Let's continue from that point then. What about the Sarcoma Cycle remains on your mind?
What a great question. So Ultratheatre Volume 1 is a book that contains the Sarcoma Cycle, which is a trilogy of plays. And then it also has an older play called Nassim Bleeds Green, which feels like a step towards the Ultratheatre aesthetic. So we staged the Sarcoma Cycle in Chicago in summer of 2023 at the Color Club. It was really a theatrical marathon because we did all three plays at once. You can call that repertory, but we were a splinter crew of the same actors, same crew members, putting these plays on sequentially all throughout the week, and then in the final couple of performances, did them all one right after another. And the venue that we booked was amazingly open with us and helpful because it's an unusual endeavor to do. But we did have to strike the set every single time. So not only did we need to like rehearse and learn three different plays, we also had to take the whole set apart and take it up a flight of stairs and then back down every single day. So the sort of athletic aspects of the production like stick with me. And then as far as the writing goes, there's been some discussion about remounting not the entire trilogy, but one or two of them. And so I often ponder what a more expanded version of each play might look like, because the three plays kind of echo within each other. There's one that takes place in 1998, one that takes place during COVID, and one that takes place in the near future. So they kind of, it became a trilogy because I felt like each individual one wasn't hitting everything I wanted it to, so it just had to grow and grow and grow. Sorry if that was all over the place.
No, that is the answer I was looking for, right? I remember when you were getting that set up, I remember wanting to go and not being able to make it out to Chicago, which is a shame. But with one anxious dog and at the time one very young child, that's understandable.
Definitely.
But you sent me images, and then, you know, one of the things that stood out to me is stage directions, the bit that isn't dialogue. I can lay the groundwork here for my like knowledge of plays. My knowledge of theater is very limited. I was in high school a theater kid adjacent. I did do I was in the chorus in Guys and Dolls and Hairspray in high school. And in freshman year, I was part of this kind of like anthological, like fairy tale sort of play wherein I did actually have lines. And I mean, like that, there was like no tryout. It was like, hey, do you want to be in a play? And I was like, yeah, who doesn't want to be an actor, right? So like, I understand what it takes to put on a play. I understand what rehearsals are like, but like from the perspective of like the bare bones doing, right? There was no like, I'm gonna get coffee with the director and we're gonna discuss my character and that sort of thing. It was very much like I did it one way and then the director was like, no, do it this way, and then I did. Or I mean, with the musicals I was in, like, right, there wasn't really like any acting involved. There was choreography, and some of the choreography was like, look like you're engaging in excited conversation with this person until it's your turn to sing again. Particularly like Guys and Dolls, because it's like we're in the bar, we're in the pool hall, we're looking at the girls, sort of thing. Like that is the extent of my knowledge. And then in college, I took a screenwriting class, so, and wherein I had to like write some short scripts. So, and then like, I don't know, I've read A Streetcar Named Desire. I've certainly read The Crucible once a year, like in school. Like I feel like I've read The Crucible like 6 times. And you know, I've also through school engaged in some Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, Midsummer Night's Dream, and I think that's it. Like I'm pretty sure I have dictated to you the extent uh, with no like in full detail what I know about theater. And so the stage directions were interesting for me as a person who's like kind of understand what is possible and also practical to do. And then trying to imagine not only what that would look like from the audience perspective, but from my limited knowledge of what it would take to put something on. And also, like, I've worked in like TV and short student films and stuff. Like, putting on productions for an audience is not like new to me, but it was like interesting, like particularly Spring Break. This idea of having like a projected phone screen behind them was really interesting to me, both from like, oh, that tells you a lot about the character, because there's room for whoever is putting this play on. Like, there's some specific stuff, but there's room, and it seems like you as the playwright like did give that room. And it seems like there's generally just that is how plays are written. There's like 16 different questions in there if you would like to address at least one of what you think those questions might be.
Sure. Something I want to like put out front that I should have said earlier is this book is like really written to be read. So it was important to me to not only create something that would be useful for me and the actors and designers to put something together that is practical and doable, but I also kind of write it with the reader in mind, in the sense that I want this to be like an enjoyable thing that you can picture in your head. And you don't even, I would hope, necessarily need to think about how to stage it per se. Like, you're just sort of picturing the characters, and then you get, because there's different approaches to stage direction. In fact, it's a pretty rich topic, I would say, among theater practitioners. Are you heavy on them? Are you light on them? Edward Albee, for example, who wrote like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and The Goat, or Who is Sylvia, he has pretty specific stage directions in his stuff, and his estate will come after people if they don't really adhere to them, especially when he was alive. If he caught wind of what you were doing and stuff, he was very specific. So my stage directions are definitely on the heavier end, but to make a more enjoyable reading experience, because for me, I was delayed in reading. So like, reading plays was really nice because of the amount of text on the page. You can kind of go through it pretty quickly. And honestly, when I read plays, it's like reading a novel for me. Like, I just kind of picture the characters versus like the practicality of it. So yeah, I always tell actors that they can ignore stage directions, and try different things. Like, I've heard of like pretty prominent actors, if they receive a script with stage directions, just crossing them out as like their first thing before they even highlight the lines, because the actor, it's on them. So it's written to be read. The book is. Yeah, I guess that's where I landed there.
Yeah, and I guess part of the reason I thought about the practicality is, one, that's just how my brain works. Like, when I read Streetcar Named Desire, because that was fairly recently, I was absolutely like not imagining people walking around in a house. I was imagining a cross section of an apartment building, right? And then people going from room to room. And also knowing that you had put it on, and not having seen any photos at the time, and imagining that you didn't have tons of money with which to put it on. It was it was trying to like solve a puzzle, an experimental archaeology project of reading the book. I also Dylan, how do you say his last name? Fahum, his introduction to Nassim Bleeds Green sticks in my head a lot, since finishing reading it the other day. Of calling out contemporary theater is like embarrassing, and truly, like, I haven't seen contemporary theater. I don't go to a lot of plays. I think the last time I saw a play, my parents, who buy season tickets to Broadway Grand Rapids, transferred their tickets of the Beetlejuice musical to me, which I guess is contemporary, but it's not, it's not literature, right? It's not the literary fiction of theater is what I'm saying. It was a great show. I had a wonderful time with it. But the I have the image of that episode of Spaced, that Simon Pegg TV show, of where they're like seeing the avant-garde theater, and it's just somebody in like weird clown makeup screeching or whatever, and everybody nodding sagely. And I don't know, like I got a friend who lives out in LA, and I see his story, and he does like photography for some like improv troupe, but it doesn't seem like it's comedy, or if it's comedy, it's not, comedy that you might think if I said the word comedy. People are taking off their clothes and also screaming, and there's seems like things are being thrown and whatever, right? Like the my knowledge of like what even a working playwright is even doing is nil. You are the sole data point.
That's funny, Joe, because I think I occupy a kind of strange position within the theater realm, just because, for example, my pal Dylan, who wrote that intro, amazing little manifesto, or taking the temperature of contemporary theater. And I think there's absolutely distinctions to be made. So like Beetlejuice, and that's awesome. You had a great time. I haven't seen that one. I'd call that maybe like commercial theater.
Sure.
And then there's like black box theaters, which would be like more localized, but perhaps they're doing a classic and they've rented the text from Samuel French or whatever. And then there's like avant-garde, and then there's all these different branches of stuff. And I definitely will say a big touchstone for me was absolutely like a tradition of poets theater. There's this interesting anthology called the Kennings edition of, I think it's just called Poets Theater, that catalogs 20th century poets writing plays for each other. They're kind of almost like chamber pieces, some of them like done in people's homes or just as staged readings, which is not to diminish with that but stage readings, or they did them in festivals, etc. And then, I'm kind of going in chronological order, but I found out about that after I was made aware of a poets theater in the 2010s that include people like Joelle McSweeney, Olivia Cronk, and Philip Sorensen, Ariana Reigns. These are some poets who have written some interesting plays. I was really, really interested in what the poets were doing specifically in the 2010s. And Toby Altman, too. He was organizing poets theater festivals in Chicago. And I loved reading them because they were so free. They were so unconcerned with practicality, with budgets, and people would do them in the most extravagant and interesting ways. And back when I was first getting into those, I was part of and then eventually led a small theater company called the Runaways Lab in Chicago. So I thought it was always interesting to bring poets theater into a more like black boxy type realm and see what would happen. And it had mixed and honestly oftentimes very exciting results. Like, to give probably the best thing I've directed, like in terms of a directorial effort, was this text that Olivia Cronk and Philip Sorensen wrote called "There's No Edge to Imaginary Things." They submitted it to the Runaways Lab's Play Festival, and people were unsure if they wanted to take it into the festival because it was such a dense text. But I looked at it, and the language was so interesting, like that I'm like, let's take it and I'll direct it, and we'll figure it out later. And it ended up like, people really were touched by that piece because of the strangeness of it and the intensity with which the actors took on that language and found their ways into it. There were a lot of it just was the perfect marrying of sensibilities. It was a really fun production to do. There were like poor like a grandma in like a nightgown kind of having a sort of psychotic break, and then she falls into a portal, and then there's these bugs molting, and that, I know it sounds like really like we were screaming naked and throwing shit, but it was, we found a format for it where it was both extremely bizarre and but people were on the edge of their seats because it was had this anarchic feeling, like nobody knew what was going to happen next, but they really wanted to know. So that's I think the potential of Poets Theater. So to go back to an earlier thing real quick, so then I'm like, oh my gosh, there's this collection of plays from the 20th century. They must be amazing, and they're not. They're really bad. They're like really boring, like juvenilia, like two people sitting on a bench, boring stuff. So that's fine, and there were some interesting things in there, but I think it's interesting that in the late 2000s, 2010s, the Poets Theater had a real richness to it. There was some really cool stuff happening, and I have to specifically shout out works by McSweeney and Rains, because I think what they did that a lot of the other Poets Theater of the 20th century did not do was they were invested in the theater form. So like Joyelle's often interrogating old Greek forms of tragedy, and she's really interested in the Deus, I'm pronouncing this wrong, Deus ex machina, where like something happens with the gods that solves everything. That's like a big concern of hers and an interest. And then she's very influenced by Artaud. And then Rains is always finding very interesting older medieval formats with which to dramatize her poetry and stuff. So I think what might set the 2010 stuff apart is an actual interest in the form and bringing a poet's sensibility to it.
That's fascinating. I mean, like, it's super exciting. I around that time, like around the same time I was getting into writing seriously, this type of stuff, right? Putting aside the childhood obsession with trying to write a fantasy epic and going into more alt-lit literary inspired stuff. I was really, really fascinated with performance art, which is like, I don't know, theater adjacent. I don't know. Maybe is there like a big beef between the performance artists and the theater people where it's like, or no? Is it?
I think it would just depend on who you asked. I had one performance art friend tell me he has a hard time with theater because he doesn't believe in the fourth wall or has a hard time suspending disbelief. Sure. But because so much has been done in performance art, that if you take some of those gestures into theater, it makes the theater feel really interesting, because theater does feel like a dusty artifact format in a lot of ways, because people have to, if you own a theater, you have to fill seats, you have to you kind of do, at least for many of them, have to meet certain expectations of what people expect from theater. So
right, yeah, I mean, like, no shade to my parents, but they're pretty standard, like Midwestern people in their 50s, right? Like, and they see a lot of plays. They go to, like I said, they have season tickets to Broadway Grand Rapids, which are not cheap, and they go see stuff at the Civic Theater. And like, I know Grand Rapids has a theater scene, or West Michigan does. The morning show on NPR that I work at, like, is often having people from Actors Theater, Jewish Theater, Grand Rapids, Ebony Road Players, Playhouse at White Lake, like, to the point, like, these people have been enough that, like, the PR person who ushers the actor in, like, knows me, right? Like, but, like, yeah, again, theater, like what is in Ultratheatre, is, like, not on the menu for those people, right? Or, you know, if it is, I don't know, those actors could very well be going to or know about, like, underground stuff, right? I mean, there's people in Grand Rapids who go to concerts but do not know about the $5 one in the basement in East Town or at the coffee shop or whatever, right? So, like, I imagine there is, but I don't know. And yeah, like, from your perspective, I mean, this is kind of getting outside of the realm of Ultratheatre, the book, but you have been working in theater as long as I've known you, and we haven't really talked about like that. Like, even is it like to be doing that, you know, in the 2020s?
What a good question. I don't make my livelihood from it, so
Mm-hmm.
it's a passion like the other literary endeavors. So, and I no longer run a troupe.
Okay.
I'm not the artistic director anymore. So I'm not as involved, but I do see a bit, and I do intend to have other things staged in the future. It varies. I mean, theater is local, theater is primal. I mean, there have been many moves from like everyone from Grotowski to Artaud to so many others who were interested in return, or not returning, but at least incorporating some primal modes of theatrical expression. Like you can imagine the cave people telling stories using their bodies and images and shadows. Like I feel like there is something very very in our blood that like likes it, and so much contemporary theater is like kitchen sink drama type stuff.
Yeah.
Even yeah, it doesn't always attend to that really gut feeling that theater can touch. So the scene in Chicago, so it's very local. So and it can be done very cheaply. So in Chicago anyway, I would say it feels very fragmented, like in the sense that after the pandemic, a lot of the smaller spaces shut down,
Mm-hmm.
and then there are some new places, there's some old places, and they just kind of, to me anyway, feel like they're orbiting very different aesthetics and communities, and they all have something interesting to offer. Like one I would mention is like Theater Y. Um, they got a permanent space in the southwest side, and they do. Melissa Lorraine is this amazing practitioner who studied Grotowski, which is this I think Polish style of theater, very very intense and embodied. And she all the plays are free. It's funded by the donors, and then she also brings in a ton of people from the neighborhood into it, so it's blossomed into its own thing. And then there's a place in Humboldt Park called, and I'm trying to highlight some of the like smaller thriving venues that are not like Steppenwolf or the Goodman, which are some bigger regional things. There's a place called Facility Theater that is very affordable for small companies to use, and they have their own house shows that they do, and then they allow smaller companies to rent there, and there's a lot of interesting stuff happening there. But like I would say, what is it like? It's like my favorite thing anybody said in the last few years is the guy who stage managed the Sarcoma Cycle. This guy's Miles Sennett. He said, "What is theater but a series of missed opportunities?"
Mm.
It's so, there's so many things you could have done and wished you did, but but then there was the marathon, but then there was that, you know, that day. There's something undeniable about live performance. So I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah. That's so fascinating to me. Like, it's exciting because it feels like there's a new world that the book is allowing me to step into, right? I mean, because just like I can look at the cast list and find them on Instagram and you know, and dig from there, right? I mean, it's tough because you're all Chicago, but like Chicago people move to Grand Rapids all the time, and so like someone's doing something, I'm sure. Um, I'm looking. I'm
Can
looking
I?
at the cover.
Oh, sorry. Can I ask you a
You
question?
sure can.
What genre would you say, if these fit a genre? What genre would you say these plays feel like to
Oh,
you?
that's interesting. Hmm. Well, so let's see. Nano Blade is seems to be a sort of retelling of a Greek tragedy. So that's easy. I'm gonna just echo. I'm gonna echo the text of the book and say that. Not you saying it, but like multiple people saying it. Spring Break almost feels like it is somehow found footage horror without the found footage, but it has that flavor to it. So I'll stand by that. And then Morning Light is it's Cronenberg when he's not doing body horror, right? It's Cronenberg making Metropolis. Like, so what is that? Like, what is that? It's like soft science fiction thriller. Yeah, that's a tough question, and that does stretch, because that also, like, my brain is putting boundaries on like, okay, well, plays probably have different genres aside from like the main genres of storytelling, but you also don't know them. So I ended up not following those rules, but it kind of like pulled my focus in an interesting way. I will echo the question back to you. What genres would you say the poems of the Sarcoma Cycle fall into?
Yeah, I would start by saying I think everything you said is completely defensible and makes a lot of sense.
Hell yeah.
I think that's cool that you read Nanoblade as a Greek tragedy, or put on the spot. You see it that way. To me, it's a kind of the format anyway is kind of like a sleazy medical drama, honestly, or like medical horror. You know what I'm saying? And then most people who read them and experience them said they felt like all horror or horror adjacent. I mean, I'm like, I guess, but I feel like to me anyway, Nanoblade does have that tragic feel to it. So I don't know exactly what that one is, but I'd call that a medical thriller for sure. And then the Spring Break, we did shoot footage. So, and our tech guy was absolutely amazing, Joe Goudreau. So we absolutely had all three of the actors in their different homes. We had their cell phones displayed behind them. And he was able to do it in such a way where they were about to go to this kid's house to see if there's a killer there and all this stuff. And it really did seem like it was streaming directly from her phone. We shot this whole thing, like basically a short film in the suburbs, near your neck of the woods in Canton, Michigan. So that was cool. And then also Spring Break is the first one I wrote, and that one was an explicit return to a certain form. The Grand Guignol, which is both the name of a theater and a style of theater from France, that was hugely influential on the slasher, and why is the word escaping me? It's the yellow. It's yellow in Italian. Giallo, thank you. The Grand Guignol is like the thing that helped format those films. So that was an explicit, like, what happens when you take the whole history of slasher cinema and bring it back into the theater? So that was very explicitly a stab at Grand Guignol horror, etc. And then the Morning Light, yeah, I think soft sci-fi drama makes complete sense. Yeah, 100%. Maybe a paranoid thriller, something like that too. But yeah, they in some ways, these plays, to me anyway, are more traditional than a lot of Poets Theater stuff, because they are very they have multiple acts to them. They have a story. They have some of the trappings you would see in more commercial theater. Hopefully, as a way to bring people together and enjoy something that erupts into other realms. People who saw the plays, it was a mix of theater goers who were more maybe like your parents, and then the reactions ran all over the place, and people who have read the plays too have different reactions to it. So it's interesting to hear different favorites, which is good, different plays they didn't like, which is interesting too. So that's fun.